The Spire station hung in the violet swirls of the Hestia Nebula like a forgotten monument to ambition. Its chrome spires caught the light of distant stars, transforming the diplomatic outpost into something between a cathedral and a weapon. Inside its pressurized halls, the Great Unification Summit had drawn delegates from across the known galaxy. Species that had warred for millennia now gathered under one roof, breathing recycled air that carried the chemical tang of 100 different atmospheres. 1,400 hours. Summit Assembly. Lieutenant Declan Thorne stood against the eastern wall of the Grand Assembly, his posture relaxed but his attention absolute. The augmented optics set into his right socket scanned the crowd with methodical precision, thermal overlays painting the room in shades of threat assessment. His organic eye, the left one, tracked exits and sightlines with the muscle memory of a man who'd survived too many situations where the only exit was through. He wore light tactical armor, enough to move, enough to stop a blade. The geometric tattoos covering his left arm disappeared beneath the black polymer plating, ancient symbols from Earth's forgotten tribes now reduced to decoration on a soldier's skin. His plasma sidearm rested in its holster, an antique by galactic standards but loaded with rounds he'd modified himself. Declan trusted metal and fire more than he trusted quantum disruptors. 3 meters ahead, Ambassador Aldrich Montrose whispered nervous instructions to his aides. The Outer Rim Coalition representative had hired Declan through back channels, paying premium rates for a bodyguard with a reputation for surviving impossible situations. What Montrose didn't know, what no one in this chamber knew, was that Declan's real employer was the Terran Intelligence Directorate. His mission had nothing to do with protecting bureaucrats. The chamber fell silent like a blade cutting through conversation. She entered. Empress Seraphine Vale of the Valyrian Ascendancy moved through the massive doors with the kind of grace that made physics seem negotiable. Her lavender skin caught the amber station lights and transformed them into something that shouldn't exist in nature. Hair the color of deep purple cascaded behind her in defiance of gravity, each strand moving as though it possessed its own consciousness. She wore robes that seemed woven from captured starlight, flowing and reforming with each step. But it was her eyes that commanded the room, solid gold, luminous, utterly inhuman. Declan felt it immediately. The aura rolled across the assembly like a pressure wave, bypassing conscious thought and striking directly at the brainstem. Around him, delegates from 100 worlds suddenly found their knees buckling. Ambassador Montrose collapsed forward with a gasp that sounded like religious ecstasy. The insectoid Ket delegates folded their arthropod legs in perfect synchronization. Even the station's security, hardened mercenaries who'd faced death without flinching, dropped their weapons and prostrated themselves. The aura of awe, the biological weapon that had built an empire. Declan remained standing, the sensation washed over him like static electricity. Uncomfortable but distant, as though his nervous system was receiving a broadcast on the wrong frequency. His left hand moved to his sidearm grip, not to draw, but to ground himself in something solid. His mechanical vision adjusted focus automatically, compensating for the slight visual distortion the psychic field created. Empress Seraphine ascended the central platform, that amber stare sweeping across the sea of bowing figures. She was making a statement without words. Witness my power. Accept my dominion, or be crushed beneath the weight of your own inadequacy. Then those alien irises found him. The luminous gaze locked onto Declan like targeting lasers acquiring a signature. He watched her expression shift, a microsecond of confusion followed by something sharper. Curiosity, calculation. Her perfect composure cracked just enough for him to see the gears turning behind that inhuman stare. She raised one hand and the assembly fell even quieter, if such a thing was possible. Who stands in defiance? Her voice carried without amplification, resonant and cold as deep space. Declan said nothing. He'd learned long ago that silence was its own form of power. Let them interpret. Let them wonder. You, she pointed directly at him, her fingers steady as an aimed weapon. Human. You dare to remain upright in my presence. Montrose, still on his knees, turned to look at Declan with pure horror bleeding across his face. Thorne, what are you doing? Kneel, you fool. Declan's organic eye met that golden stare. His voice, when it came, was rough as gravel. I stand where I choose, Your Majesty. The chamber erupted in gasps and whispered prayers in languages Declan didn't speak. No one addressed the Empress like that. No one could. The aura made defiance neurologically impossible. Seraphine descended from the platform with predatory grace. Her guards, 8-foot-tall Valyrian warriors in ceremonial armor that pulsed with contained energy, moved to intercept. She waved them back with a gesture that brooked no argument. She crossed the distance between them until she stood just beyond arm's reach, studying him the way a scientist might study an anomalous specimen. Immunity, she said softly, more to herself than to him. Impossible. Apparently not, Declan replied. Her eyes narrowed, the gold in them seeming to intensify as though she was pouring more power into the aura. Declan felt the pressure increase like descending too quickly in deep water. His vision blurred at the edges. Sweat beaded on his scarred forehead, but his knees didn't buckle. His spine stayed straight. Seraphine's perfect mask slipped further. For the first time in 2 centuries, someone had told her no and meant it. Detain him, she commanded, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. Have him brought to my private sanctum. I will determine if he is an aberration or an opportunity. 1530 hours. Private interrogation. The holding cell was more luxurious than most officers' quarters Declan had occupied during his service. Soft bioluminescent panels provided ambient light that shifted through calming wavelengths. The furniture was crafted from some kind of living wood that adjusted to his weight when he sat. There were no bars, just an energy field humming at the threshold with barely contained violence. They'd stripped him of his weapons and armor, leaving him in just his black tactical undersuit. They'd even taken his augmented eye's external power pack, forcing the implant to run on internal reserves. The battery indicator in his peripheral vision showed 6 hours remaining. Declan sat on the edge of the adaptive bench and waited. Patience was a weapon most people forgot to maintain. The door dissolved without warning. Empress Seraphine entered alone, which genuinely surprised him. No guards, no retinue, no witnesses. Just the Empress herself, wrapped in flowing robes that seemed simpler than what she'd worn to the assembly. In the confined space, her presence was overwhelming in a purely physical sense. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, and that purple flesh seemed to pulse with its own inner radiance. You are Declan Thorne, she said without preamble. Former Terran Marine Corps, Force Recon Division, dishonorably discharged for insubordination. Now a mercenary operating across 6 sectors. And what else? A curiosity. You did your research fast. I have efficient people. She circled him slowly, never breaking eye contact. But they cannot explain you. The aura of awe is not psychic suggestion. It triggers a cascade of biological imperatives. Fear, reverence, submission. Even artificial intelligences experience a form of it when exposed. Yet you stood. Must be inconvenient. Inconvenient? She repeated the word as if tasting something foreign. Do you have any idea how many species have knelt before me? How many warlords have wept at my feet? I ended the War of 7 Suns with a single appearance on the Krillix homeworld. Their entire military command prostrated themselves and begged for mercy. Sounds boring. The temperature in the room dropped. Literally, Declan saw frost begin to form on the walls, ice crystals spreading in fractal patterns. Boring? Everyone already beaten before you even start. Declan stood, meeting that luminous gaze directly despite the height difference. No challenge, no resistance, just submission and fear. Yeah, that sounds boring as hell. For a long moment, she simply stared at him. Then unexpectedly, she laughed. The sound was like crystal bells shattering, beautiful and slightly wrong. You are either supremely brave or catastrophically stupid. I've been called both. The frost receded. Seraphine moved closer, close enough that Declan could smell her. Something like ozone and exotic flowers that had never grown on Earth. I could have you executed. You could train now. I could have your homeworld sterilized. You won't. His artificial optic whirred softly as it adjusted focus, because you're more interested in why I'm immune than in punishing me for it. Her lips, fuller and more alien than human, curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Perhaps, or perhaps I simply wish to see how long your defiance lasts. She paused, studying his face with an intensity that felt like being dissected. But you're correct. I am interested. More than that. I need to understand you. Why? Because, Seraphine said quietly, If one human can be immune to my power, others can be as well. And if there is a species that can resist the aura, then everything I have built is vulnerable. Declan saw it then. Not fear exactly, but something close. Strategic concern. An empress who had ruled through absolute psychic dominance, suddenly confronting the possibility that her weapon might have a counter. There's more, she continued. You're here hunting something. The Whisper Collective. Declan's expression didn't change, but his heart rate spiked. The enhanced vision tracked the dilation of Seraphine's pupils. She was reading his micro-expressions. A hive mind entity from the void between stars, Seraphine said. They wear people like clothing, coordinating actions across dozens of bodies while maintaining perfect cover. You think they have infiltrated this summit. You think they are planning something catastrophic. You're well informed. I am always well informed. She turned away from him, moving to the viewport that showed the nebula's violet swirls. The collective is immune to my aura as well. Beings of pure consciousness, they experience my power but are not compelled by it. They are the first threat in 200 years that I cannot simply dominate into submission. So you know they're here. I suspected. Your presence confirms it. Seraphine glanced back at him. But here's what troubles me. I can read every thought in this station when I focus. I sense emotional currents, deception, intent. Yet the collective evades me. They hide in subconscious layers, mimicking normal thought patterns. I've sensed wrongness for weeks but couldn't isolate the source. They've had millennia to perfect the disguise. She turned fully to face him. Your immunity is neurological, yes? A quirk of human brain chemistry? Something like that. The same immunity that blocks my aura also blocks the collective's psychic infiltration. You're invisible to them. She smiled, and this time it was genuine. You're the perfect hunter, Lieutenant Thorne, and I am the perfect bait. We should discuss terms. What kind of terms? The kind where we both get what we want. You eliminate the collective's presence at this summit. I learn how to fight enemies that my power cannot touch. She moved closer again, and Declan realized she was testing something. Testing him. You will undergo assessment, combat trials. If you survive, if you prove useful, we will hunt the collective together. And if I refuse, you won't. Those amber irises held his. Because you came here to stop them, and you cannot do it alone. The collective has already compromised multiple delegates, including your supposed employer, Ambassador Montrose. You need my resources. I need your immunity. This is strategy, Lieutenant, not a request. Declan considered for exactly 3 seconds. What kind of assessment? 1,800 hours. Breaking room. The breaking room was a vast circular chamber deep in the station's core. The walls were lined with alcoves containing weapons from 100 cultures. Plasma rifles, gravity hammers, molecular whips, and stranger things Declan didn't have names for. The floor was marked with training circles in materials that gave slightly under his boots like muscle tissue. In the center stood Empress Seraphine, now dressed in form-fitting tactical armor that mirrored her guard's design but was clearly superior in both materials and craftsmanship. The armor's surface rippled with energy patterns, adapting to her movements. Her purple hair was bound back in a severe knot. An endurance assessment, she announced. Her voice carried across the chamber, despite the distance. You claim your species is resilient. Prove it. The first test was simple brutality. 3 of her elite guards entered the ring, moving with the fluid coordination of beings who shared thoughts. They wore light training armor and carried shock staffs that hummed with contained voltage. Declan had 30 seconds to survive. He lasted 2 minutes and dropped all 3. The key was understanding that their telepathic link made them predictable. They moved as one organism, which meant they shared the same blind spots, the same split-second delays when consensus had to form. Declan used the environment, triggering a low-gravity well by slamming his fist into a floor panel. The guards separated, their synchronized movements failing as they adapted to different gravitational vectors. He fought dirty, eye strikes, joint locks, using their own momentum against them. When the last guard hit the floor, Declan stood breathing hard, his knuckles bleeding, and looked up at Seraphine. She was smiling. Again, she commanded, but this time they know your tactics. The second round was harder. The guards adapted, breaking synchronization intentionally to counter his strategy. But Declan adapted faster, using feints and misdirection to create openings where none should exist. When it was over, all three guards were down again, and Declan had added a split lip and bruised ribs to his collection of injuries. Acceptable, Seraphine observed. Next test. The second trial involved weapons. They gave him a Valyrian plasma lance, an elegant weapon that responded to psychic commands. Declan couldn't interface with it, couldn't feel the mental triggers that would make the weapons sing. He looked at it for 30 seconds, then calmly disassembled the power cell, rewired the emitter to work on manual triggers, and used the components to build a crude but effective scattergun. Seraphine watched the entire process, leaning forward with visible interest. You're destroying a weapon worth more than most starships. I'm making it useful, Declan corrected, testing the weight. Your people design everything around psychic control. What happens when you face an enemy who can't be read? Who doesn't broadcast intentions? We overwhelm them with superior numbers and firepower. You lose to primitives who fight with rocks and fire. Declan aimed the rebuilt weapon at a target drone. The blast was inelegant but devastating, turning the drone into shrapnel. Tactics beat technology when the technology has built-in assumptions. Interesting philosophy. As Seraphine gestured, and a series of tactical puzzles appeared on holographic displays. Third test, strategy. The scenarios were complex. Hostage situations with incomplete information. Defensive positions with limited resources. Assault planning against fortified targets. Declan worked through them methodically, his solutions prioritizing efficiency over elegance. Several times his approach shocked the Valyrian observers, unconventional to the point of seeming barbaric. But they worked. Your guards failed these scenarios, Declan noted, because they rely on psychic coordination, Seraphine agreed. Against an enemy that can disrupt that coordination, they become predictable. You've shown me the weakness in my own military doctrine, Lieutenant. Valuable lesson. Final test? Seraphine descended from her observation platform, drawing a long, curved blade from one of the wall alcoves. The metal gleamed with an edge that looked sharp enough to cut light itself. I want to see how you move against someone with 200 years of combat experience. No powers, no aura, just the physical. They circled each other. Seraphine moved like silk over water, that otherworldly complexion glistening under the harsh training lights. Declan moved like stone, economical, grounded, waiting for the opening. She was faster, stronger, and had accumulated more martial knowledge than most species possessed in total. He was human, tired, bleeding, and operating on stubbornness alone, Daggermong. She struck first. The blade whistled through air with speed that shouldn't be possible. Declan didn't try to match her velocity because he couldn't. Instead, he read her body language. The micro shifts in weight distribution that telegraphed her attacks a fraction of a second before they landed. He deflected rather than blocked, redirected rather than stopped. On her seventh strike, he caught her extended wrist, stepped inside her guard, and swept her legs. Empress Seraphine hit the mat hard, those luminous eyes blazing with shock and something else, something hungry. Declan didn't press the advantage. He released her wrist and stepped back, offering his hand. You're fast, he said, skilled, but you've never had to fight someone who doesn't freeze up when you look at them. Someone who sees you as an opponent, not a goddess. Seraphine rose slowly without taking his hand, her breathing elevated for the first time. A thin line of purple blood, darker than her skin, traced from her lower lip where she'd bitten it during the fall. She touched it with one finger, stared at the blood as though seeing something miraculous, then looked at Declan. Pain, she whispered. I haven't felt real pain in I don't remember when. Your Majesty, one of the guards began to move forward. Leave us, Seraphine commanded, not looking away from Declan. All of you. Now. The guards hesitated, then obeyed. The chamber doors sealed with a heavy finality. Seraphine approached Declan slowly, still touching the cut on her lip. Her hand was trembling, the first sign of vulnerability he'd seen from her. Do it again. What? Make me feel it again. The impact, the sensation. Her voice carried an urgency that bordered on desperation. You don't understand what it's like. When my people evolved our psychic abilities, we stopped needing physical sensation. We experience the world through thought, through connection. Efficient, powerful, perfect. She grabbed his hand, the one still scraped from the earlier fights, and pressed it to her face. But the intensity, the immediacy, we lost all of that. I can sense pressure as data, temperature as information, damage as abstract notification. But texture, the nuance of touch, the sharp clarity of pain, her voice dropped. Those are gone, have been for 10,000 years. Her skin was cool and smooth, but Declan felt her shiver at the contact, felt her lean into his palm like someone starving for warmth. I can read every thought in this station when I choose, Seraphine continued, her voice raw and unguarded. I can project my will across star systems, but I cannot truly feel the texture of my own robes against my skin. I cannot taste food the way you do, cannot experience pleasure or pain as anything more than distant reports from a body I barely inhabit. Everything is muted, filtered, like living in a dream that never ends. Declan understood then. The empire, the power, the submission of billions, none of it could give her what she'd lost, what her species had traded away for psychic supremacy. You're asking the wrong person, he said quietly. I'm a soldier, not a teacher, and I'm not gentle. Those amber irises locked onto his, fierce and desperate and wholly alive for the first time. I know. That's exactly why I'm asking you. 2,200 hours. Sanctum. The Sanctum's inner chamber was nothing like Declan expected. He'd anticipated cold magnificence, throne rooms designed to intimidate. Instead, he found something almost intimate. Dim lighting from bioluminescent plants, the soft sound of flowing water from an artificial stream, air that smelled of night-blooming flowers he didn't recognize. Seraphine dismissed her attendance with a gesture. Privacy fields activated, humming at a frequency just below human hearing. They were truly alone now, isolated in a bubble of silence within the massive station. My species called it the Transcendence, Seraphine said, moving to a curved window that looked out over the nebula's violet swirls. 10,000 years ago, when we first developed our psychic abilities, we thought we were evolving beyond the limitations of flesh. The first generation celebrated freedom from crude physical sensation. No more pain, no more hunger, no more base desires. And now, Declan asked, standing near the entrance, now we are a species of ghosts wearing meat. She turned to face him. We reproduce through psychic bonding, consciousness merging without bodies ever touching. We consume nutrition through intravenous supplementation because we cannot taste. We experience the universe as pure information, processing it with perfect efficiency. We are the most advanced civilization in known space, Lieutenant Thorne. She approached him slowly, and Declan noticed something different in her movement. Less predatory, more uncertain. Vulnerable in a way empresses shouldn't be. And we are profoundly, existentially alone. You felt it when you touched me in the breaking room, she continued. I saw your expression change. The texture of my skin, the temperature, my pulse. You actually experience those things as real, immediate sensations. Not as data, not as abstract information, as something that mattered in the moment. Yeah. Show me, she said, not a command, a request. Teach me what that feels like. Declan hesitated. This was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with politics or violence. Crossing this line meant complications he couldn't calculate, consequences he couldn't predict. But he'd never backed down from danger before, and something in those amber eyes told him she was asking for more than sensation. She was asking for proof that she was still alive. He took her hand carefully, deliberately, and guided it to his face. Her cool palm pressed against the scarred skin of his jaw, his cheek, the ridge of scar tissue where the augmented vision interfaced with organic nerve endings. Against that lavender skin, his scars stood out in sharp relief. Seraphine gasped, her breath catching. The variations, she breathed. Rough here, smooth there, the heat of blood beneath. The different textures, where flesh meets technology. She moved her hand to his neck, feeling his pulse. Your heartbeat. So fast, so immediate, so real. You make me nervous. I make you nervous? She sounded genuinely surprised. The man who defied an empire is nervous because I'm touching him. Different kind of danger. Her fingers traced the geometric tattoos on his left arm, following the lines where they disappeared under his tactical suit. The symbols were ancient, meaningless to most of the galaxy, but they told a story anyone could read if they knew what scars meant. These markings, they have significance. Tribal ink from Earth. Each pattern represents something survived, something overcome. Battles, brothers lost, choices made. His voice roughened. A history written on skin because memory isn't enough. We mark ourselves to remember. A permanent record. Seraphine's voice carried wonder. We store our histories in psychic archives. Perfect recall, never fading, never changing. But this, she pressed her palm flat against his tattooed bicep. This is physical, real. It exists in the world, not just in thought. When you die, these marks die with you. That makes them more precious than any archive could ever be. Declan reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he touched her face, his calloused fingers rough against that otherworldly complexion. She closed her eyes, shuddering as though the contact was almost too much to bear. "What do you feel?" she whispered. "Cool," he said honestly. "Smooth like polished stone, but with warmth underneath. Alive in a way stone never is." He moved his fingertips to her throat, feeling the pulse there. "Your heartbeat, slower than mine, steadier, like you process the world at a different speed. We don't experience fear responses the way you do. Our biology is too controlled, too efficient. Adrenaline, cortisol, all the chemical chaos of emotion, we evolved past that. You're experiencing one now. Fear response. I can feel it in your pulse." Those golden irises opened, and Declan saw uncertainty there, raw and unhidden. "This is overwhelming. Too much sensation. Too fast. I feel like I'm drowning in input my brain doesn't know how to process. We can stop." "No." Her hand covered his, pressing it harder against her throat. "Don't stop, please. I've been numb for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be present in my own body. Don't take that away. Not yet." The pleas broke something between them. The Empress, who commanded billions, reduced to asking, reduced to needing something as simple as human touch. Declan's other hand moved to her waist, feeling where the armor gave way to softer material beneath. Seraphine made a sound, not quite human, not quite alien, and suddenly she was pressing against him, her hands exploring his shoulders, his chest, mapping the topology of scars and muscle with desperate curiosity. "Teach me," she said against his neck, her breath cool on his skin. "Teach me everything you know about sensation, about fighting without power, about being physical instead of psychic. The collective is coming, and when they do, I need to be more than just an empress with an aura. I need to be..." She pulled back, looking at him with fierce determination. "I need to be whole." "Why me?" "Because you see me as a person, not a goddess. Because you stood when everyone else knelt. Because you made me bleed, and I want to understand why that felt more real than 2 centuries of worship ever did." Declan cupped her face in both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "If I do this, if I teach you to fight the way humans fight, it's going to hurt. Real combat means real damage. Real sensation means real pain, real exhaustion, real limits. You sure that's what you want?" "I'm certain." "The collective. When do they move?" 48 hours, perhaps less. I felt the wrongness building, pressure in the psychic currents like a storm about to break. They're waiting for something, the right moment, maximum impact. Then we have 48 hours to turn an empress into a warrior. He released her face, stepped back to create professional distance. "First lesson starts at 600 tomorrow. Combat conditioning. Your people rely on psychic power, which means your bodies are undertrained for sustained physical conflict. We fix that first." Seraphine straightened, and just like that, the Empress returned. The vulnerable woman disappeared behind strategic focus, though Declan could still see traces of her in the slight trembling of her hands, the elevated pulse visible at her throat. "How long will this take?" "The training. For basic competence? Months, years for mastery." Declan's expression hardened. "But we don't have years, so I'm going to teach you to survive, to adapt, to think like prey instead of a predator, because against the collective, that's what you'll be. It won't be elegant, it won't be comfortable, but it might keep you alive. And the rest, the sensation, the connection, she struggled for words. The feeling alive part? Declan moved toward the door, then paused at the threshold. That comes whether we want it or not. Combat has a way of making everything real, Your Majesty. The question is whether you can handle real when it arrives. Seraphine, she corrected softly. When we're alone, call me Seraphine. He turned back one final time. One more thing, the assessment. Did I pass? Seraphine's smile was small but genuine, the first real smile he'd seen from her. With distinction, Lieutenant. Welcome to the war. The door reformed behind him, leaving Seraphine alone with the implications of what she'd just started. She touched the cut on her lip again, feeling the sting, savoring it. For the first time in 200 years, she felt present in her own skin. Outside in the diplomatic quarters, delegates slept, unaware that some of them were already dead, their bodies worn like suits by an entity that hungered for consciousness itself. Ambassador Montrose lay in his quarters, dreaming dreams that weren't entirely his own, feeling thoughts that came from the spaces between stars. And in 48 hours, everything would burn. But in that moment, in the privacy of her sanctum, Empress Seraphine Vale pressed her hand to the window and watched the nebula turn, feeling the cool glass against her palm, and smiled. Part 2. When Power Fails. Day 2 arrived at 0630 hours with the sound of screaming metal. Declan was already awake, running through weapons maintenance in the quarters Seraphine had assigned him, when the station's alarm system tore through the silence. Not the standard proximity alert, not the measured tones of a scheduled drill. This was the bone-deep wail of catastrophic systems failure, the kind of sound that meant people were already dying. He was armed and moving before his conscious mind fully registered the threat. The corridor outside pulsed with emergency lighting, red strobes painting everything in shades of blood and shadow. Station personnel ran past him in controlled panic, heading for muster stations that might already be compromised. His enhanced vision switched to tactical overlay, mapping the station's layout against known defensive positions. His communicator crackled to life. Seraphine's voice, calm as deep space and twice as cold. Lieutenant Thorne, my sanctum. Now. He found her in the command center, standing before a holographic display that showed the spire's interior in three-dimensional detail. She'd traded her robes for full tactical armor, the kind that whispered of technologies Earth hadn't dreamed of yet. Her purple hair was bound back in a severe knot. Those amber irises tracked multiple data streams simultaneously. Around her, Valyrian officers worked in focused silence, their telepathic coordination allowing them to process information faster than verbal communication ever could. But Declan saw the tension in their movements, the way they kept glancing at their empress as though seeking reassurance. Report, Seraphine commanded, not looking away from the display. A Valyrian tactical officer, his lavender skin pale with stress, gestured at the hologram. Red markers bloomed like infection across multiple decks. Security breach in the diplomatic sector, multiple contacts. They're not responding to psychic coordination protocols. Their minds are... He struggled for the words. Wrong, Your Majesty, unified but fragmented, moving with singular purpose but through disparate hosts. Declan felt ice settle in his gut. He'd seen this before on Kepler Station 3 months ago. 27 people dead before TID had even confirmed collective presence. How many? He asked. At least 20 confirmed hosts. The officer pulled up biosignature data. Ambassador Montrose, 3 Ket delegates, the Krillex trade minister. Others were still identifying. They've been moving as one consciousness while maintaining individual behavior patterns. Perfect infiltration. Seraphine's hand moved through the holographic display, isolating different sectors. Her fingers traced patterns in light, tactical calculations happening faster than Declan could follow. Months, she said quietly, her voice carrying self-recrimination. They've been hiding in plain sight for months, waiting, watching, learning our routines, our security protocols, our weaknesses. How did you miss them? Declan asked. You said you can read thoughts across the station. Because they're brilliant. Her expression hardened. The collective doesn't just wear bodies, Lieutenant. They hide in subconscious layers, mimicking normal thought patterns, dreaming the dreams their hosts would dream, feeling the emotions their victims would feel. I sensed wrongness, a psychic dissonance I couldn't identify. But they've had billions of years to perfect the disguise. By the time I could isolate individual compromised minds, they'd already moved to the next phase. Before anyone could respond, the holographic display shifted. A new signal appeared, pulsing from the station's core. The energy signature was organic, wrong, something that shouldn't exist in normal space. "What is that?" Seraphine demanded. "Unknown, Your Majesty. It appeared 3 minutes ago. Power consumption is massive and increasing exponentially. It's interfacing with the station's psychic network and our main reactor simultaneously." But Declan moved closer to the display, his tactical mind assembling pieces of a nightmare puzzle. "It's a relay," he said, "and they brought something through, something to amplify their psychic range and broadcast their consciousness." Those luminous eyes widened fractionally, the only sign of alarm she'd permit herself. "Amplify to what range?" "Sector-wide, if it's anything like the one we destroyed on Kepler. Thousands of worlds, billions of potential hosts. Once it activates, every conscious mind within broadcast range becomes vulnerable to possession." Declan's jaw tightened. "They're not here to kill you, Your Majesty. They're here to wear you. Use your body to control the Valerian's psychic network. Turn your entire species into extensions of the collective." The command center fell silent except for the soft hum of equipment and distant alarms. Seraphine turned to face her officers. When she spoke, her voice carried the absolute authority of someone who'd ruled for 2 centuries. "Evacuate all non-essential personnel to the diplomatic yacht. Seal sectors 7 through 12. I want loyalist forces concentrated here, here, and here." She marked positions on the hologram with sharp gestures. "Establish firing lanes. No one gets to the core without going through our defensive positions. And activate the dampening fields." "Your Majesty, the dampeners were sabotaged during the initial infiltration. The collective disabled them weeks ago. We'd need hours to repair the systems." "Then we buy those hours." Seraphine's aura flared outward, just for a second, and every Valerian in the room straightened as though struck by lightning. "Lieutenant Thorne and I will handle the relay directly. You coordinate the evacuation and prepare the dampeners for emergency restoration. The moment that relay is destroyed, it will create a feedback pulse. Use that pulse to force the dampeners back online." "Your Majesty," the tactical officer began, "standard protocol requires you to evacuate first. The yacht can... Standard protocol assumes I'm a figurehead who needs protecting." Seraphine's voice dropped to something dangerous. "I am not. This is my station, my summit, my responsibility. The collective thinks they can take me, wear me like a puppet to control my people." Her aura blazed like a psychic sun, and Declan felt it even through his immunity, a pressure wave of pure imperial will. "Let them try." She turned to Declan, and in that moment, she was every inch the empress who'd built an empire. "Lieutenant, your assessment. Can we reach the relay?" Declan studied the tactical display, calculating routes and defensive positions with the cold precision of someone who'd planned assaults on worse odds. "Diplomatic sector to the core. 16 corridors, 4 major junctions, 2 gravity transition zones. They'll have concentrated forces along the most direct routes. Heavy resistance guaranteed. Can we reach it?" "Yes." "How?" "We don't take the direct route. We go through the maintenance shafts, come at them from below. It'll be slower, tighter quarters, but they won't expect an empress to crawl through service tunnels." He paused. "But Your Majesty, reaching the relay isn't the problem. Destroying it is. If it's designed like the Kepler relay, it'll be biologically hardened against conventional weapons and psychic attacks." Seraphine smiled, sharp and cold as a knife. "Then we get creative. Gather a strike team. 10 of your best, loyal beyond question. We move in 5 minutes. Your Majesty, I should lead." "You will advise, Lieutenant. I will lead." Those amber eyes held his. "The collective is targeting me specifically. That means I'm the bait in the weapon. You taught me yesterday that power without adaptability is just another kind of weakness. Time to see if I learned the lesson." The maintenance shafts were never designed for combat operations. Narrow corridors with exposed piping, walls that wept condensation from atmospheric recyclers, floors that rang with every footstep despite their efforts at stealth. Seraphine led the strike team through the claustrophobic darkness, her tactical armor's running lights painting everything in pale blue. Declan moved beside her, his plasma sidearm tracking potential threats. Behind them, 10 Valyrian warriors advanced in disciplined silence, their weapons primed and ready. "Contact ahead," one of the warriors reported, his telepathic link to the others creating perfect coordination. "Three hostiles, blocking junction 72. Seraphine raised her fist, and the team stopped instantly. "Declan," she said quietly, "your advice?" He moved forward, using his augmented vision to peer around the corner. Three figures stood in the junction ahead, their postures wrong, movements too synchronized to be natural. One of them wore the face of Ambassador Montrose. "Collective hosts," Declan confirmed. "Junction's too narrow for flanking. We'll have to go through them. Can you identify which one still has the strongest human consciousness? Which one is fighting the possession hardest?" His mechanical eye cycled through different scan modes, analyzing neural activity patterns, looking for variants in brainwave synchronization. "Montrose, his patterns show more independent variants. He's fighting it, but he won't last long. The collective is tightening its grip." Seraphine nodded once, then stepped around the corner into full view of the hosts. The effect was immediate. All three bodies turned toward her with mechanical precision, their eyes going void black as the collective's consciousness flooded forward to meet this new threat. Empress Seraphine Vale. They spoke in perfect unison, their voices layered with harmonics that shouldn't come from human throats. "We have waited so long to meet you. Not as subjects, not as conquered, but as equals preparing to become one. You wear my people like clothing," Seraphine said, her voice steady despite facing the entity that had consumed civilizations. "You violate consciousness itself. You are parasites dressed in philosophy. There is nothing equal about what you offer." The hosts tilted their heads in synchronized curiosity, a gesture that was profoundly inhuman despite the human bodies performing it. "Parasites? We offer transcendence, union with the eternal collective, no more loneliness, no more isolation. You of all beings should understand, Empress. You who roll from a throne of enforced worship. You who touch no one because your power makes genuine connection impossible. We know your pain. We taste your isolation every time you broadcast your aura. Join us and never be alone again." Declan saw Seraphine's hand tighten on her weapon, the only sign the words had landed. "Join us," the host continued, their void black eyes fixed on her with terrible intensity. "Let us show you what it means to be truly connected. Not through domination, but through unity of purpose. Your psychic network, our distributed consciousness. Together, we could bring order to the chaos of individual thought. Together, we could end the suffering of separation that plagues all sentient life." "Ambassador Montrose," Seraphine interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade cutting through their sermon. "If you can hear me, if any part of you still exists in that corrupted flesh, fight. I know you're still in there. I can feel the variance in your neural patterns. Fight them." One of the hosts, Montrose's body, twitched. His left hand spasmed, fingers curling into a fist as though trying to grasp something that wasn't there. His mouth moved independently of the others, and for just a second his eyes flickered from void black to normal brown. "Your Majesty." The voice was strained, barely human, like someone screaming underwater. "Can't hold. They're everywhere. Inside. Help me, please." The other two hosts moved to restrain him, their hands closing on his arms, but Seraphine was faster. Her aura blazed outward in a pattern Declan had never seen before, focused like a surgical laser instead of a blanket wave. She was targeting only Montrose's body, her psychic power attempting to strengthen his individual consciousness, give him enough mental leverage to fight the collective's control from the inside. Montrose screamed, his body convulsed, caught between two wills fighting for dominance, each one trying to burn the other out of existence. Blood ran from his nose, his ears, the strain of the psychic battle manifesting in physical trauma. "Now," Seraphine commanded. The Valyrian warriors opened fire, precise shots designed to disable, not kill, because they all understood that the hosts were victims, not enemies. The hosts wearing the Ket delegates' bodies dropped, their nervous systems overwhelmed by neural disruptors. Montrose collapsed last, unconscious but alive, his body still twitching from the psychic strain. Seraphine knelt beside him, her hand on his forehead, feeling the damaged neural pathways. "Can you separate the collective from his mind?" Declan asked. Not permanently, not without killing him. The collective's consciousness is woven through his neurons like cancer through healthy tissue. Cutting it out would destroy what makes him human. She stood, her expression grim. But I can give him moments of clarity. Brief windows where he's himself again. It's not much, but it's all I can offer. She turned to her warriors. Secure him. Get him to the medical bay. Restrain him gently but thoroughly. When we destroy the relay, the collective's hold might weaken enough for our doctors to attempt extraction. If we survive this, maybe we can save him. Maybe. They moved deeper into the station's infrastructure, following maintenance corridors that grew narrower and more hostile with each level they descended. The station's systems were failing around them in slow motion. Gravity fluctuated, creating pockets where they had to pull themselves along handholds or push off from surfaces. Atmospheric processors wheezed, struggling to maintain breathable air. Emergency lighting strobed in patterns that hurt to watch, disorienting and nauseating. At Junction 94, they found the bodies. Station security personnel, 12 of them, torn apart with methodical precision. The walls were painted with blood in colors that represented half a dozen different species. Declan recognized the tactical positions they'd tried to establish, the defensive formation that should have worked against conventional attackers. Should have. They were overrun, he said quietly, his enhanced vision recording the scene for later analysis. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Didn't stand a chance once the collective concentrated forces here. Seraphine moved through the carnage, her face unreadable behind the professional mask of command. She stopped at one body, a young Valyrian guard whose eyes were still open, still golden even in death, staring at nothing. Tyven, she said softly, and Declan heard something break in her voice despite her efforts to remain controlled. He served my personal detail for 30 years. Never complained, never questioned, survived 3 assassination attempts and 2 wars. She closed his eyes with gentle fingers, a gesture of respect that transcended species. He deserved better than this. They all did. Your Majesty, we need to move, one of the warriors urged, his voice tight with barely suppressed grief. More hosts will be converging on our position. We're leaving a trail they can follow. Let them come. Seraphine stood, and something had changed in her posture, in the set of her shoulders. Something colder, harder, forged from grief into determination. Every moment they waste hunting us is a moment they're not activating that relay. Every second we buy is another chance for the evacuation to complete. Declan, how much time do we have before the relay reaches critical threshold? He checked his tactical display, cross-referencing power consumption data with the energy signature of the relay construct. 30 minutes, maybe less. The relay's drawing massive energy from the station's reactor. When it reaches full charge, it'll broadcast. After that, nothing we do will matter. The collective will own every mind in range. Then we reach it in 29 minutes. Double time. No more stealth. Speed is our ally now. They ran. The gallery was the largest chamber in the station's core, a vast space designed to showcase artistic achievements from across the galaxy. Under normal circumstances, it would have been beautiful beyond description. Sculptures that defied physics floating in carefully controlled gravity wells. Holograms of impossible colors cycling through abstract patterns that existed in frequencies most species couldn't perceive. Music that played in dimensions beyond sound, felt rather than heard. Now it was a nightmare rendered in bioluminescent horror. The relay construct hung suspended in the center of the chamber, a massive organic thing that pulsed with sickly light. It was the size of a small ship, its surface covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly, geometries that suggested dimensions human minds weren't meant to perceive. Cables of living tissue connected it to the station's power grid, pulsing with energy transfer that made the air itself vibrate. The thing was wrong on a fundamental level. Not just alien, but anti-natural. Something that shouldn't exist in a universe governed by rational physics. Around it, a dozen collective hosts stood in perfect formation, their bodies motionless, but their void black eyes tracking everything with predatory awareness. Seraphine stepped into the gallery, her strike team fanning out behind her in textbook formation. Declan moved to her right, his weapon trained on the nearest host, his tactical mind already calculating firing solutions. The relay noticed them. Declan felt it like pressure in his skull, a presence that was vast and hungry and utterly wrong. When it spoke, the words bypassed his ears entirely, resonating directly in his brain with a force that made his teeth ache. Bright Queen, you have come to us at last. Seraphine's voice was steady, projected to carry across the chamber with absolute authority. I've come to end you. End? There is no end, only transformation, only unity. The relay's bioluminescence intensified, patterns shifting faster, hypnotic and nauseating. We have existed since before your stars were born. We have consumed civilizations that make yours seem like children playing with toys. We have tasted the thoughts of a trillion minds. And now we offer you a gift beyond price. I don't want your gifts. You lie. We can taste your loneliness like copper on the tongue. 200 years of worship and not one moment of genuine connection. Your power isolates you. Your aura makes love impossible. Everyone who looks at you sees a goddess, never a person. But with us, you could be infinite. Every mind in your empire, truly yours. Not through domination, but through unity. You would never be alone again. Declan saw Seraphine's hand tremble for just a second. The collective was offering her exactly what she'd confessed she wanted. Real connection, an end to isolation. The very thing she'd been missing for 2 centuries, wrapped in the promise of cosmic unity. Seraphine, he said quietly, urgently, don't listen to them. I'm not. Her voice was steady, but he heard the effort it took. They offer unity, but it's a lie. Unity requires choice. What they're selling is erasure. The death of individual will dressed up as transcendence. I've seen what they did to Montrose, to all the others. That's not connection, that's violation. She raised her weapon, aiming at the relay's central mass. You cannot destroy us. We are beyond your weapons, beyond your comprehension. Maybe, but I'm not here to destroy you with conventional weapons. Seraphine lowered her gun, and her warriors looked at her in confusion. Declan's tactical mind raced, trying to understand her strategy. Then she released her aura, not the usual pattern of submission and awe, not the focused laser she'd used on Montrose. This was something entirely new, something Declan had never felt before, even through his immunity. She weaponized it, transformed it from a tool of dominance into a psychic scream that resonated through the gallery like a shockwave made of pure will. The collective hosts staggered, their synchronized movements failing for the first time. The relay's bioluminescence flickered, patterns disrupting as though someone had thrown static into a perfect signal. For the first time, Declan heard something that might have been pain in that vast ancient consciousness. The Bright Queen has teeth. Interesting, but insufficient. The host recovered, began advancing, but Seraphine maintained the psychic assault, pouring her power into disrupting the collective's coordination, creating chaos in their perfect unity. Sweat beaded on her lavender skin, her breathing elevated, every muscle trembling with the effort of sustaining this level of output. Declan, she said through gritted teeth, the charges! Now! He understood instantly. She was buying him time, using her power in a way that drained her but disrupted the collective's ability to coordinate their defenses. He sprinted toward the relay, pulling demo charges from his tactical harness. The host tried to intercept, but Seraphine's warriors engaged them in close combat, preventing them from reaching Declan. He placed charges at 3 critical points on the relay's structure, points where the organic tissue connected to the power conduits, where destruction would cascade through the entire system. His hands worked with practiced efficiency, setting timers, checking connections, ensuring maximum damage. The relay seemed to sense what he was doing, its bioluminescence pulsing faster, more agitated. Timer set, he called out. 45 seconds. Everyone out, Seraphine commanded, her voice strained from maintaining the psychic assault. Now, move! They ran. The galleries at exits were kilometers away through twisting corridors, and Declan's internal chronometer counted down with merciless precision. 40 seconds, 35, 30. A collective host, one they'd missed in the initial sweep, lunged from a side corridor. It tackled one of the Valyrian warriors, bringing them both down in a tangle of limbs. The warrior's weapon skittered across the deck. Useless. 25 seconds. Seraphine skidded to a halt. Declan grabbed her arm. No time. We have to leave him. She tore free of his grip with strength that shouldn't have been possible, ran back toward the struggling figures. The host had its hands around the warrior's throat, squeezing with inhuman force. Seraphine didn't hesitate. Her aura blazed at maximum intensity, focused entirely on the host's consciousness. The effect was devastating. The host's mind simply shattered under the assault, consciousness fragmenting into pieces too small to sustain awareness. The body collapsed, dead before it hit the ground. 15 seconds. Seraphine pulled the warrior to his feet, and they ran together, the Empress and her guard, sprinting for the blast alcove that offered the only protection within range. 10 seconds. They made it with 3 seconds to spare, diving into the reinforced alcove as Declan's charges detonated with precisely calibrated fury. The explosion was beautiful in its violence. The relay construct ruptured, its bioluminescent fluid spraying across the gallery in patterns that painted the walls in alien light. The psychic network it had been maintaining collapsed instantly, and through the station's communication systems, Declan heard dozens of screams as the collective hosts were suddenly severed from their hive mind, their consciousness cut adrift. In the aftermath, pressed together in the narrow alcove, Seraphine kissed him. Brief, fierce, desperate, with relief and adrenaline and the simple joy of being alive. "You're insane," she breathed against his lips, learning from the best. They stayed there for a moment, both alive against impossible odds, feeling each other's heartbeats through the tactical armor, grounding themselves in physical reality after the psychic chaos of the battle. Then Seraphine's communicator crackled. "Your Majesty, the dampening fields." The relay's destruction created a massive feedback pulse through the psychic network. "We can activate the dampeners now." The pulse restored the damaged systems. "We're bringing them online." Seraphine accessed the station network through her neural link, her eyes going distant as she interfaced with the Spire's infrastructure. Confirmed. Dampeners activating across all sectors. The collective consciousness should fragment, separate into individual host bodies without the relay to maintain unity. She paused, and Declan saw her expression change. Horror replacing relief, fear bleeding through her professional composure. No, that's not right." "What's wrong?" "The collective, its core consciousness, the central intelligence that coordinates all the hosts." Her hand went to her throat, fingers pressing against her pulse point, as though checking she was still herself. "It's not fragmenting, it's consolidating, pulling all its distributed consciousness into a single host to survive the dampening field." "Which host?" Those luminous eyes met his, and Declan saw true fear there for the first time since he'd met her. "Me." The invasion happened faster than thought, faster than reflex, faster than anything Declan's enhanced combat instincts could track. One moment Seraphine was standing, reaching for her communicator to order her warriors to defensive positions. The next, her body went rigid, locked in a paroxysm of neural warfare that turned her muscles to stone. Her eyes flickered, strobing between their normal gold and something darker, something that writhed with billion-year-old malice. She screamed, not a sound of pain, but of rage and violation and desperate resistance, a sound that contained multitudes. Declan caught her as she collapsed, lowering her to the deck as gently as combat training would allow. Her muscles spasmed against him, every nerve firing in contradiction. Her body transformed into a battlefield where two impossibly powerful wills fought for dominance. He could feel the battle happening inside her, could see it in the way her features shifted between her own expressions and something alien, wearing her face like a mask. "Seraphine," he said urgently, holding her face between his hands. "Focus on me. Focus on the physical. You're stronger than this parasitic consciousness. Fight it." Her mouth moved, but the voice that came out was layered, harmonized, utterly wrong. "We are Legion." The collective spoke through her lips, struggling against her resistance. "This flesh is ours now. Blank one, watch as we consume your Empress." Then Seraphine's voice, strained and desperate and wholly human despite the alien body, broke through like sunlight through storm clouds. "Declan, so many voices, millions of them, billions, all talking at once. Can't hold them. All back." Her hand seized his with crushing strength, nails digging into his skin hard enough to draw blood, anchoring herself to physical reality through pain. "Medical bay," he said to the nearest warrior, his voice carrying absolute command. "Get her to medical now. Move." They moved through corridors at a dead run, Seraphine's body alternating between violent resistance and terrible stillness. Every few seconds, she'd scream, and Declan didn't know if it was her or the thing wearing her fighting to maintain control. Her warriors carried her with the reverence of soldiers handling their wounded queen, but Declan could see the fear in their eyes. They understood what would happen if the collective won this battle. The medical bay's neural stabilization unit was state-of-the-art Valyrian technology, designed to treat psychic trauma across dozens of species. Declan secured Seraphine in the restraints with hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't let themselves. Watching her face cycle through expressions that weren't hers, weren't anything remotely human. "Lieutenant," one of the medical officers began, her voice tight with controlled panic. "We don't have protocols for collective possession of this magnitude. Standard extraction procedures assume the host consciousness is weakened, secondary. But the Empress, she's fighting them with power equivalent to their own. If we try standard extraction, the psychic feedback could kill her. Could kill everyone in the medical bay. Then we don't use standard extraction." Declan pulled up the neural stimulator controls, the same device Valyrians used to reactivate dormant sensory pathways in patients who'd suffered psychic trauma. The collective is pure consciousness, beings of thought that have never had bodies, never experienced physical sensation. They've existed for billions of years as distributed intelligence in the void between stars. Understanding dawned in the medical officer's eyes, followed by horror at the implications. You want to weaponize sensation against them. Overwhelm their consciousness with sensory input they can't process. Not just overwhelm, burn them out of her mind using the very thing they have never experienced. Declan turned to Seraphine's restrained form. Her eyes were fully void black now, the collective in complete control, but he could see her still fighting beneath the surface. "Your Majesty, if you can hear me anywhere in there, I need you to trust me one more time. This is going to hurt more than anything you've ever experienced. Both of you. But it's the only way I know to save you." He activated the neural stimulator at maximum intensity. Every nerve ending in Seraphine's body fired at once. Pain, yes, overwhelming and absolute, but also touch, temperature, pressure, texture, the full spectrum of physical existence compressed into a single moment of sensory apocalypse. Her scream was primal, reality-bending, a sound that existed in dimensions beyond normal hearing and cracked the medical bay's observation glass like a gunshot. Inside her mind, the collective recoiled. They were beings of pure thought, consciousness without form, intelligence that had evolved in the spaces where matter couldn't exist. The sudden assault of sensation, too much, too fast, too brutally real, was alien in a way that terrified them beyond their capacity to process. Pain was a concept they understood intellectually but had never experienced. The tyranny of flesh, the prison of nerve endings, the overwhelming flood of data that came from simply existing in a physical body, these things were anathema to beings who had spent eternity as thought alone. "Stop!" the collective's voice roared through Seraphine's mouth, desperate now, almost pleading. "What is this agony? We cannot comprehend. This burning. Make it cease." "That's called being alive," Declan said grimly, his hand on the stimulator controls, adjusting intensity with surgical precision. "Welcome to biology, you parasitic bastards." Seraphine's body thrashed against the restraints with force that bent metal. Declan watched the neural activity readouts with the cold focus of someone who understood he was walking a knife's edge between driving out the invader and killing the host. Her heart rate was spiking into territory that should be lethal. Her synaptic patterns fragmenting into chaos that looked like brain death. But it was working. The alien consciousness was losing cohesion. Unable to maintain unity in the face of overwhelming physical input, it had no framework to process. "Seraphine," Declan called out, leaning close enough that she might hear him through the chaos. "Fight. Use what I showed you. The sensation isn't your enemy, it's your weapon. You've been reconnecting with your physical body, relearning what it means to feel. That's your advantage. You understand this in a way they never can. Use it. Drive them out." He saw the moment she understood, saw the shift in her body language from reactive thrashing to purposeful resistance. She stopped fighting the sensory overload and embraced it, channeling the overwhelming flood of physical data into a psychic battering ram. Her consciousness, newly reacquainted with physicality after 2 centuries of numbness, became fundamentally incompatible with the collective's purely mental existence. The battle raged for subjective eternities compressed into objective seconds. Then, with a final scream that shattered every piece of glass in the medical bay and set off alarms throughout the station, Seraphine expelled the collective from her mind. The entity's consciousness, unable to consolidate elsewhere due to the dampening fields, unable to exist in a physical form it couldn't comprehend, simply dissipated. Billions of years of existence, countless civilizations consumed, infinite knowledge accumulated across the void, all of it ending in a cascade of confusion and terror as the collective discovered that consciousness without the ability to adapt was just another form of death. Declan shut down the neural stimulator with shaking hands. Seraphine slumped in the restraints, unconscious but alive. He checked her vitals with fingers that wanted to tremble but forced themselves to steadiness. Heart rate elevated but stable. Neural patterns chaotic but reorganizing. Brain activity showing normal Valerian baselines. She'd survive. He collapsed into the chair beside her, exhaustion finally catching up like a debt come due. They'd done it. Against an enemy that had consumed entire civilizations, against odds that would make professional gamblers weep, they'd actually won. Seraphine's hand moved weakly. Declan caught it, felt her fingers close around his with desperate strength, anchoring herself to reality through touch. Her eyes opened. Gold. Clear. Entirely her own. That, she whispered hoarsely, her voice raw from screaming, was unpleasant. Declan laughed, the sound cracking with relief and something that might have been hysteria trying to break through his professional composure. Yeah, welcome to being human. Outside the medical bay, in the corridors and chambers of the dying spire, collective hosts collapsed as the dampening fields fully activated. Without the relay to maintain their connection, without the core consciousness to coordinate their actions, they were just traumatized individuals trying to remember who they'd been before the violation. But in the violet swirls of the Hestia Nebula, something stirred. The collective's core consciousness was destroyed, but backup forces always waited in the dark. And on the spire, in a medical bay that smelled of ozone and recycled air, and the sharp tang of overloaded medical equipment, an empress and a lieutenant prepared for whatever came next. Together. Part 3, the choice to stand. Seraphine woke to the sound of proximity alarms screaming through the medical bay, and for one terrible moment, she thought the collective had returned to finish what they'd started. Her body ached in ways that defied description. Not the distant acknowledgement of damage that Valerian physiology normally provided, but actual pain, sharp and immediate and almost welcome in its reality. The neural stimulator had done more than drive out the collective. It had permanently rewired her sensory pathways, torn down the barriers her species had built over 10,000 years of evolution, and given her back what they'd lost. She could feel everything, the cold deck plating beneath her bare feet, the texture of medical sheets against her skin, rough in some places, smooth in others, the taste of recycled air, metallic and stale, the sound of her own heartbeat, loud and insistent, and underneath it all, a faint echo of Declan's presence, as though the desperate connection they'd formed during the extraction had left psychic traces that would never fully fade. Report, she commanded, her voice rough, but carrying the authority of 2 centuries of rule. The medical officer's fingers flew across holographic displays, pulling up tactical data that painted a nightmare in light and shadow. Multiple contacts emerging from the nebula's density field, Your Majesty. 6 signatures, biomechanical design consistent with collective warship patterns. They're not responding to hails. Weapons hot. Approach vector indicates hostile intent. Declan was already at the viewport, his augmented vision cycling through threat assessment protocols. Seraphine joined him, moving with careful deliberation as her newly sensitive nervous system processed sensations that should have been familiar but felt alien after 200 years of numbness. Together they watched the nebula birth monsters. The ships were organic nightmares given form and purpose. Sleek hulls that pulsed with bioluminescence. Surfaces that seemed to ripple and flow like living tissue, moving with the same disturbing synchronization as the hosts they'd fought. They weren't designed for diplomacy or trade. They were designed to crack stations open like eggs and harvest every conscious mind inside, leaving nothing but empty meat behind. What we faced here was just an infiltration force, Declan said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen this play out before. Scouts, advance operatives. These are the cleanup crew, the collective's response to a successful resistance. The first salvo hit before the spire's weakened defenses could respond. The station shuddered, whole sections depressurizing in explosive decompression that turned atmosphere into deadly projectiles. Alarms cascaded into chaos as systems failed faster than damage control could manage, faster than even Valerian efficiency could compensate. Seraphine accessed the station network through her neural link, processing damage reports with brutal clarity even as her newly sensitive body registered every vibration, every temperature fluctuation, every environmental shift that marked the station's death throes. Life support failing in 3 sectors, main reactor offline and unstable. Hull breaches multiplying faster than emergency sealant could deploy. Collective bioconstructs, still infesting the lower decks, cut off from coordination, but no less deadly for their confusion. The spire was dying by inches, and those warships would ensure it never recovered. Evacuation status, she demanded. Executive hangar reports the diplomatic yacht at 70% capacity. Docking bays 2 and 4 are cut off by hull damage. We've got approximately 300 personnel trapped in those sectors with no clear route to evacuation points. Declan moved to the tactical display, his mind already calculating vectors and possibilities with the cold precision of someone who'd planned impossible rescues before. The yacht can make it out if we launch now. The warships are concentrating fire on the station's core, trying to expose the reactor. There's a window, maybe 5 minutes, where evacuation could succeed before they adjust targeting priorities. Then we use those 5 minutes to maximum effect. Seraphine turned to the medical officer. Coordinate with the hangar. Get every survivor aboard that yacht. Compress environmental systems. Disable non-essential sections. Pack them in like cargo if you have to. Use every cubic meter of space. No one gets left behind unless physics makes it impossible. Your Majesty, evacuation protocol requires you to be on the first transport. Your safety is paramount to... Protocol is dead. Her luminous gaze carried absolute finality. I will not abandon my people while I still draw breath. I am Empress, not because I sit on a throne and demand worship, but because I accept responsibility for those under my protection. That means last one out, not first. Another impact rocked the station, closer this time, more personal. Seraphine felt it through the deck plating, through the walls, through the very infrastructure of her authority crumbling around her. Her newly sensitive body registered every vibration as pain and warning both. Declan studied the power consumption data, his expression growing darker as understanding bloomed. The reactor, he said, voice tight. When the collective sabotaged it during their infiltration, they didn't just take it offline. They destabilized the magnetic containment deliberately. It's a trap. If someone tried to restart it without knowing about the sabotage, without proper calibration, it would go critical, Seraphine finished, her tactical mind already assembling the pieces. Uncontrolled cascade failure. How long until breach? From the moment someone initiates restart, 20 minutes, maybe less, depending on how carefully they work. And the damage the collective did is subtle enough that standard diagnostics wouldn't catch it until too late. In the blast radius from a full antimatter containment breach, Declan pulled up engineering schematics, running calculations that made his jaw tighten with grim understanding. Station's reactor uses antimatter containment with fusion backup systems. Full breach would trigger a fusion reaction in the nebula's hydrogen-rich gas. We're talking about a detonation visible from 3 star systems. Nothing survives within 100,000 kilometers. Not the station, not escape pods. And definitely not collective warships, no matter how advanced their shielding. Seraphine looked at the tactical display, at the 6 collective warships converging on the spire like predators circling wounded prey, at the evacuation data showing 300 people who couldn't reach the yacht in time, at the power consumption graphs showing those warships preparing boarding operations that would turn every survivor into a new host body. She'd ruled for 200 years. She'd ended wars with a word. She'd built an empire on the foundation of absolute psychic dominance. And now, at the end of everything, she had one choice left that mattered, One choice that would define what kind of empress she'd truly been. "We weaponize the reactor," she said, her voice carrying the calm of absolute certainty. "Turn the Spire into the largest bomb anyone's ever deployed. Trigger it manually. Take the warships with us when we go." The command center fell silent except for the distant sounds of the station dying, metal groaning under stresses it was never designed to bear. "Your Majesty," the medical officer began, his voice carefully controlled, "that would be a suicide mission. Even if you successfully triggered the reactor, there's no way to reach escape velocity before detonation. The math doesn't work." "I'm aware of the mathematics." Seraphine's expression was serene, almost peaceful. "Those warships will kill everyone on this station, then move to the next target and the next, consuming consciousness until there's nothing left in this sector but the collective wearing a trillion stolen faces. Or we end them here. Now, at a cost I'm willing to pay." Declan moved closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear, private despite the audience. "There's another option. Launch the yacht with all the survivors, call in military support, contain this from orbit. You don't have to die here, Seraphine. The galaxy needs you alive." "Does it?" She met his gaze. "For 200 years, I've ruled through fear, through power that made genuine connection impossible. People knelt not because they chose to, but because their biology gave them no choice. I've been a tyrant dressed in legitimacy, and I never even realized it until you showed me what I was missing." She turned to look out the viewport at the dying station, at the nebula beyond. "Yesterday you taught me what it feels like to be present in my own body. Today I choose to die protecting people instead of dominating them. That's worth something, Declan. That's worth everything. It means my existence had purpose beyond accumulating power. You're not doing this alone. That's not a request, Lieutenant. That's an order from your Empress. Good thing I have a history of ignoring orders from authority figures." His scarred face held no fear, only quiet resolve. "You'll need someone who knows reactor systems, someone to handle the manual overrides while you manage magnetic containment, someone to watch your back when the bioconstructs realize what we're doing and try to stop us." Seraphine wanted to argue, wanted to order him to safety, wanted to protect him the way he'd protected her. But she saw the truth in his eyes, saw the same understanding she felt. This was his choice too, his mission, his stand against the darkness. And she had no right to take that choice away from him. "Final evacuation order," she commanded, her voice carrying across the command center with imperial authority. "All personnel to the executive hangar immediately. Launch the yacht the moment the last survivor boards. No delays, no exceptions. No one waits for us." "Your Majesty, what about Lieutenant Thorne and I have work to do? That's all you need to know. Now move. Every second you waste questioning is a second fewer for evacuation." They moved. The reactor level was a cathedral dedicated to forces that could birth stars or end worlds. Coolant lines ruptured, spraying radioactive steam in patterns that turned the air into poison, even through their armor's filters. Control systems flickered with corrupted code, screens showing error messages in languages that predated human civilization. Warnings written by engineers who'd understood exactly how dangerous these systems were. The magnetic containment fields fluctuated wildly, barely holding antimatter in configurations that violated every safety protocol ever written. A normal engineering crew would need days to make this safe, weeks to repair the damage the collective had done. Seraphine had 20 minutes to make it catastrophically unsafe in exactly the right way. "I'll handle the manual overrides," she said, moving to the primary control console with purpose. "You need to keep the magnetic containment stable while I bring the reactor back online. If the fields collapse before we're ready, we get a premature detonation. No time for evacuation, no time for anything. Just immediate death for everyone still on the station." Declan positioned himself at the secondary console, his hands moving across controls designed for beings with psychic interfaces, adapting to alien technology through sheer stubborn determination. "I can't feel the systems the way you can. I'm blind here. You'll need to guide me through every adjustment." Seraphine pressed her hands to the control panel, closing her eyes in concentration, reaching out with senses she was still learning to use. The station had been built by her people millennia ago, its core systems partially organic, designed to respond to Valyrian consciousness in ways that purely mechanical systems never could. She'd never interfaced with infrastructure before, never needed to when servants and subordinates handled such crude necessities. But now she reached out with her newly awakened senses, with psychic awareness made sharper by physical sensation, and felt the reactor respond. It sang to her, a song of barely contained violence, of forces powerful enough to crack planets held in check by fields measured in billionths of a meter. She felt its pain, its damage, its desperate struggle to maintain coherence like trying to hold water in hands made of broken glass. Stabilizing, she said, sweat beading on her lavender skin despite the coolant systems. Field strength increasing, fluctuations dampening. You can start the override sequence. Panel 7, Subsystem Theta. Reroute power from the backup manifolds. Declan worked with brutal efficiency, his hands moving with the precision of someone who'd done field repairs under fire before. It was crude engineering, the kind that would make any proper tech specialist weep, shortcuts and jury-rigged solutions that violated every best practice. But it worked. The reactor was coming back online, and more importantly, it was becoming unstable in exactly the way they needed. The power curve was rising too fast. The containment field stressed beyond design parameters. The antimatter reactions cascading toward critical mass with mathematical inevitability. Contact. Collective bioconstructs poured into the reactor level, like a wave of corrupted flesh. Things that had been human once, or Valerian, or species Seraphine didn't recognize. All of them twisted into weapons by the collective's desperate attempts to salvage something from their failed invasion. Flesh molded around metal, organic tissue fused with circuitry, moving with mechanical precision toward the two beings trying to turn the station into a bomb. "Keep working," Seraphine commanded, her voice steady despite facing a dozen enemies. "I'll handle them." She fought like Declan had taught her during their brief training, not with overwhelming psychic force that would drain her reserves, but with tactics, with positioning, with the brutal economy of violence that came from accepting that power alone wasn't enough. Her blades sang through corrupted flesh. Her movements were efficient, economical, wasting nothing. But there were so many of them. A construct's blade caught her across the ribs, tearing through armor and flesh both. Pain exploded bright and immediate, and Seraphine laughed, actually laughed because she could feel it. Real pain, real danger, real stakes. Not abstract data about damage, but the sharp, visceral reality of a body that could break. She killed the construct with a psychic strike that left its brain boiling in its skull, then moved to engage the next one. "Reactor critical mass achieved," Declan announced, his voice tight with controlled urgency as he set the timer with steady hands. 15 minutes. The hangar is 4 minutes away at a full sprint. Then we'd better sprint fast. Seraphine cut down another construct, her movements flowing like water, deadly and beautiful. "How many more?" 6 contacts converging on our position. "We need to move now." They ran through corridors that were actively trying to kill them. Gravity fluctuated wildly, pulling them towards ceilings and walls with forces that threatened to tear muscles from bone, then reversing to slam them into floors with crushing impact. Atmosphere vented in explosive bursts, creating vacuum pockets that would have been instantly fatal without their armor's emergency seals. Behind them, the reactor began its death song, a rising whine that would end in annihilation, the sound of forces meant to power civilizations now committed to destroying everything within reach. 14 minutes. The collective forces realized too late what had happened. They tried to flee, tried to shut down the reactor with whatever compromised systems they could access. But Seraphine had made sure it was beyond any emergency stops, beyond any safety protocols, beyond anything but mathematical inevitability. The Spire was going to die, and it was taking its killers with it. 12 minutes. The executive hangar was chaos incarnate. Hundreds of delegates, guards, and station personnel crowded toward the diplomatic yacht, a vessel designed for elegant interstellar travel, not mass evacuation under combat conditions. Valerian warriors maintained order through sheer discipline and the respect their empress commanded, but panic was setting in anyway, the primal terror of beings who knew they were running out of time. "Your Majesty!" The guard commander rushed forward, his violet skin pale with stress and fear. "The yacht is at maximum capacity. We can't fit anyone else without compromising life support integrity. The environmental systems are already operating beyond safety margins. Then we compress more, Seraphine commanded, her tactical mind processing solutions faster than fear could interfere. Disable the observation decks, the entertainment sections, the private quarters. Convert every available cubic meter to life support. Strip that yacht down to hull and engines and emergency systems. Leave nothing behind that doesn't keep people breathing. 10 minutes. A massive impact rocked the hangar, and suddenly the world was tearing apart. One of the collective warships had made it to docking range despite its focus on the reactor, its boarding proboscis punching through the hangar's external hull like a spear through flesh. The breach was catastrophic, a wound that would have been instantly lethal if the station wasn't already dying. Bioconstructs poured through the ram, cutting off the yacht's escape vector with their bodies, creating a wall of corrupted flesh between salvation and the people desperate to reach it. Get the delegates aboard, Seraphine commanded, turning to face the threat with blade in hand. I'll buy you time. Your Majesty, you need to board the yacht. We can hold them long enough for you to... I gave an order. Her voice carried 2 centuries of absolute authority. Execute it, now. She moved to intercept the constructs, and beside her, Declan appeared with enough weapons to equip a small army. Plasma rifles, gravity grenades, molecular blades, personal shield generators, all the equipment the Valyrian guards had given him at her command, turned into an arsenal of last stands. Together, he asked. Together. They fought like something out of legend, like heroes from stories people told to remember why courage mattered. Seraphine's newly awakened tactical awareness combined with Declan's raw human adaptability, creating a defensive position that the collective couldn't overcome despite their numbers. The bioconstructs fell in waves, but more kept coming, an endless tide of corrupted flesh and malevolent purpose pouring through the breach. 8 minutes. The node beast emerged. It was massive, easily 4 times the size of any bioconstruct they'd faced, a pulsating organism that served as a mobile psychic relay for the collective's remaining forces. Even with the dampeners active across the station, it radiated malevolent intelligence, its consciousness vast enough to create its own local psychic field. Its body was a nightmare of biomechanical fusion, organic tissue wrapped around a skeletal frame of living metal that pulsed with stolen life force. Tendrils writhed from its central mass, each one tipped with weapons that evolution had never dreamed of. Technologies made flesh in service of ancient hunger. Seraphine felt its presence like pressure in her rebuilt sensory network, like being pressed against broken glass. This thing was different from the constructs they'd been fighting. This thing was aware, intelligent, the collective's last desperate attempt to salvage victory from the jaws of defeat. Declan, the yacht, make sure it launches on time. Not leaving you to face that thing alone. That's not a request, Lieutenant. It's a direct order from your Empress. I know. His scarred face held no fear, only quiet determination. Still not leaving. The node beast attacked with devastating precision and inhuman speed. Its tendrils lashed out faster than thought, and Seraphine barely managed to deflect them with psychic barriers that cracked under the assault like glass under sledgehammers. Declan fired his last plasma charge directly into its central mass, and the beast screamed, a sound that existed in dimensions beyond normal hearing, a cry of rage and pain that shattered equipment and shook the hangar's damaged structure. 6 minutes. Its counterattack was apocalyptic in scale and fury. A tendril of living metal moved faster than Seraphine's newly trained reflexes could track, faster than Declan's enhanced combat instincts could compensate. It punched through his shield generator like the protection was made of paper, punched through his tactical armor like it was silk, punched through his chest like he was nothing at all, nothing but meat in the way of its purpose. Seraphine watched it happen in slow motion, every detail burned into her consciousness with cruel clarity. Watched the tendril emerge from Declan's back, slick with blood that was too red, too human, too real. Watched his augmented eye flicker and die, the mechanical components failing as power was cut. Watched him fall, his weapon clattering across the deck with a sound that seemed impossibly loud. Something inside her broke, not her mind, which remained clear with terrible focus, not her will, which crystallized into purpose sharp as diamond, something deeper, something fundamental. The part of her that had learned to be cautious, to be calculating, to rule through measured application of power. That part died screaming. Her aura blazed outward with such intensity that the node beast actually recoiled despite its size and power. She didn't try to make it submit, didn't waste energy trying to dominate something that couldn't be dominated. She simply tore into it with raw psychic fury, ripping the creature apart from the inside with force born of absolute rage and grief and desperate love for someone she couldn't afford to lose. The beast's screams grew louder, more desperate, more human despite its inhuman form. She found its consciousness, that vast, ancient intelligence that coordinated the collective's forces, and she crushed it. Not carefully, not precisely. With the subtlety of a star going supernova, burning away everything that made it what it was until nothing remained but meat and metal cooling on the deck. The beast died, and its death sent psychic shockwaves through the remaining constructs. Deprived of coordination, deprived of purpose, they fell into confusion that the Valyrian warriors exploited with ruthless efficiency. But Seraphine didn't see any of it. She was already at Declan's side, dropping to her knees beside him, her hands hovering over his chest as though afraid to touch the wound for fear of making it worse. He was dying. She could feel it in the wet heat spreading across her hands, in the way his breathing was shallow and wrong, in the cold creeping into his limbs as his body began the process of shutting down. 4 minutes. His organic eye found her face and he smiled. The expression was painful and beautiful, full of something that transcended words. Yacht, he managed, blood on his lips making his words slurred. Launch it. It already left. Everyone's safe. We're alone. Her voice broke despite her efforts to keep it steady. We did it, Declan. Everyone made it out. We won. Good. Didn't want witnesses for this part. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Seraphine pressed her forehead to his, her tears falling onto his scarred face. Valyrians didn't cry. They'd evolved beyond such crude emotional displays millennia ago. But she was crying now. Actual tears born of genuine connection and desperate loss and the terrible knowledge that she'd found something precious only to watch it die. I won't leave you, she whispered against his skin. Not after everything. Not after you showed me what it means to be alive. Then she felt it. The memory of the medical bay, of the neural stimulator, of how she'd channeled raw psychic essence into pure sensation during the battle against the collective. If energy could flow one way, transforming thought into feeling, maybe it could flow the other way too. Maybe she could give him what her people had forgotten how to share. Life force, pure vitality, the fundamental spark that separated consciousness from cooling meat. She placed her hands on his chest over the terrible wound and reached inside herself for something her species had abandoned 10,000 years ago when they decided that physical connection was weakness, that touch was primitive, that existing as pure thought was somehow superior to the messy reality of flesh and blood. She poured herself into him, not through thought, not through psychic domination, through physical touch, through the connection they'd built over 2 impossible days, through sheer desperate will that refused to accept his death as inevitable. She felt her own vitality flowing out like water from a broken vessel, felt Declan's failing systems respond with desperate gratitude, felt his collapsed lung reinflate and his shattered ribs begin to knit. 2 minutes. What are you doing? He gasped, his voice stronger already despite the ongoing trauma. Something my people forgot we could do, before we became too afraid of physical intimacy, before we decided that touching another person was somehow beneath us. Her voice was strained, every word costing her as she channeled her life force into his dying body. We used to heal each other this way. Consciousness to consciousness, life to life, sharing our essence to save those we couldn't bear to lose. She could feel the cost. Her psychic strength draining, her own vitality bleeding away with every second, her power diminishing in ways that might never fully recover. She might never command her aura the way she had before, might never rule with the same absolute dominance, might spend the rest of her existence as something less than the empress she'd been. And she didn't care. This will drain me, she gasped as energy flowed from her core. My psychic reserves, perhaps permanently. I may never access my full power again. The aura that made billions kneel might become nothing more than a shadow of what it was. But you're worth it, Declan. You're worth everything. The wound in his chest began to close, flesh knitting with speed that defied biology. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to live, enough to fight, enough to matter. And in the process, something else happened, something her species had warned against in their ancient texts about the dangers of this forbidden healing. Their life forces intertwined, not just touching, not just sharing, merging in a way that created permanent psychic bonds, connections that would echo through their consciousness for as long as either of them drew breath. She could feel him inside her now, not as an invader like the collective had been, but as a presence welcome and desired. His thoughts accessible if she reached for them, his emotions bleeding into hers in ways that made it hard to tell where she ended and he began. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Can you walk? She asked, her voice rougher than before, diminished by what she'd given away. Can you? They helped each other up, two battered warriors who'd forgotten how to quit, supporting each other's weight as they stumbled toward the forgotten maintenance shuttle in the corner of the hangar. Declan hot-wired it while Seraphine used what remained of her strength to blast open the hangar doors with psychic force that was a shadow of her former power. 1 minute, the shuttle launched into the Violet Nebula just as the reactor went critical behind them. The detonation was visible from 3 star systems, a light show that would be studied by astrophysicists for generations. The Spire's antimatter reactor breached containment and transformed into something that resembled a newborn star. The antimatter annihilation triggered fusion reactions in the nebula's hydrogen-rich gas, creating a cascading chain reaction that consumed everything within 100,000 kilometers. The Hestia Nebula lit up like a second sun being born, brilliant and terrible and absolutely final. The collective warships never even managed to raise their shields. One moment they existed, predators closing on wounded prey, sophisticated biomechanical nightmares representing billions of years of evolution. The next moment, they were constituent particles, scattered across light years of space, reduced to their component atoms by forces normally reserved for stellar cores. Inside the maintenance shuttle, Seraphine and Declan held each other in the dim emergency lighting, both alive against impossible odds, feeling each other's heartbeats through the permanent bond that connected them now. The psychic link hummed with shared sensation, shared relief, shared exhaustion, shared marsh, yet simply existing in the same moment. Your life force, Declan said eventually, his voice rough but stronger than it had any right to be. What you did to heal me. I can still feel you inside me, like you're part of my thoughts now. We're bonded, Seraphine explained, her voice tired but content in ways she'd never experienced before. Psychically, physically, permanently. It's the deepest form of connection my people can form, the most intimate joining of consciousness. We'll share sensations, emotions, even thoughts if we lower our barriers enough. Every joy you feel, I'll feel echoes of it. Every pain I experience, you'll sense. We're separate beings, but connected in ways that transcend normal relationship boundaries. Sounds intense. It is. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Are you uncomfortable with it? With being bound to me for the rest of your life? Declan considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. A permanent psychic connection to an alien empress. Their lives literally intertwined in ways that couldn't be undone, couldn't be escaped, couldn't be separated even by death according to Valyrian texts. Any sane person would be terrified by the implications. No, he said finally. Weirdly, no. Feels right somehow, like finding something I didn't know I was missing. Good. Her smile was tired but genuine. Because I don't know how to undo it, and I wouldn't want to learn even if I could. You're mine now, Declan Thorne, and I'm yours. That's what this bond means. Partners, equals, connected in ways most beings never experience. They rendezvoused with the diplomatic yacht 6 hours later, the larger vessel having maintained safe distance while monitoring the detonation's aftermath. The delegates had watched the spire die from viewports and sensors, the reality of how close they'd come to extinction written on every face regardless of species. 300 survivors who owed their lives to an empress who'd chosen sacrifice over safety, and a human who'd refused to let her face death alone. When Seraphine and Declan transferred aboard via docking tube, the reception was complex and multi-layered. Fear at what the empress had become, respect for what she'd done, and a dawning understanding that the political landscape had fundamentally shifted in ways no treaty could have accomplished. 3 days later, medical recovery. The Krillex cruiser's medical bay smelled of antiseptic and alien chemistry, a combination that Seraphine's newly sensitive olfactory system found both unpleasant and fascinating. She'd spent 72 hours in recovery, her body healing from the damage she'd sustained, while her mind adapted to permanent changes in her psychic architecture. Declan woke in the bed beside hers, his chest wrapped in regenerative bandages that would dissolve as his tissues finished knitting. The bond between them hummed with shared sensation, and she felt the moment he became conscious, felt his confusion give way to memory and understanding. "How many?" he asked without preamble, his voice rough from disuse. 47 confirmed dead from the collective's initial attack and the fighting that followed. Seraphine answered quietly, having obsessed over the casualty reports during her recovery. 312 saved thanks to your plan and our sacrifice. Tyven among the dead. Ambassador Montrose survived but may never fully recover from the possession. Half my personal guard gone. The price of my failure to detect the collective sooner. Not failure, strategy. Declan's hand found hers across the gap between beds. They played a long game. Hidden neural patterns you had no reason to suspect. You adapted when you realized the threat. That's not failure. That's tactical flexibility under impossible conditions. The Empire disagrees. She squeezed his hand, drawing comfort from the physical contact. My council has been vocal in their displeasure. They demand I dissolve the bond, return to traditional rule, remove you from my presence. They see you as corruption, as weakness made manifest. Some have called for your execution as punishment for compromising imperial dignity. What did you tell them? That they're welcome to try. Her smile was sharp. And that any who attempt it will discover exactly how much of my power remains. I may have sacrificed much of my strength to save you, but what remains is still formidable when properly motivated. Declan laughed, then winced as the movement stressed his healing ribs. So what now? Your council hates me, your empire is in turmoil, and we're bound together for life. Not exactly the diplomatic outcome anyone was hoping for. No, Seraphine agreed, but it's the outcome that matters. The Empire will resist these changes initially. They'll see my transformation as weakness, my bond with you as proof that I've been compromised. But they'll learn. They'll realize that what we have, this partnership, this connection, makes me stronger in ways pure power never could. That I've rediscovered something they all forgot when we abandoned physical sensation. And if they don't learn, then I'll teach them. Her amber eyes held fierce determination. I didn't survive the collective and sacrifice my power just to return to being the empress I was before. That version of me was powerful but incomplete. This version, the one bonded to you, the one who can feel and fight and choose, this is who I was meant to become. She stood carefully, her body still adjusting to constant sensory input, and moved to the viewport that showed stars wheeling past. The collective will return, she said, watching distant galaxies turn. We destroyed one node, eliminated their presence in this sector. But they're vast, patient, eternal. They'll come again, and when they do, they'll be prepared for our tactics. Then we'll adapt again. Declan joined her at the viewport despite his injuries. That's what humans do best. We're not the strongest species, or the fastest, or the smartest, but we're stubborn, and we learn, and we refuse to stay dead when the universe tries to kill us. Is that what you think I need? Human stubbornness? I think you need what you've always needed. He took her hand. Someone who sees you as a person instead of a goddess. Someone who will stand beside you instead of kneeling at your feet. Someone who will tell you when you're wrong and support you when you're right. That's what the bond gives you. Not just connection, but partnership. Seraphine leaned against him, feeling his warmth through their shared connection, grounding herself in physical reality. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For remaining standing when everyone else knelt. For showing me that submission isn't the only form of respect. For teaching me to feel again, even though it hurt. For choosing to stay when you could have run. For being worth the sacrifice. They stood together in silence, watching the stars turn, two beings from different worlds who'd found something neither had been looking for. 3 weeks later, The Reconvened Summit. The Great Unification Summit reconvened not on the Spire, which was now an expanding cloud of gas and memory, but on a neutral Krillex military cruiser provided specifically for this purpose. The assembly chamber was smaller than the grand hall they had lost, more intimate, designed for function rather than spectacle. The delegates who gathered were fewer in number, but somehow more present, more genuine. They'd all faced death together, had all been saved by an empress who chose sacrifice over safety. That created bonds that politics alone could never forge, connections built on shared trauma and mutual survival. Empress Seraphine Vale stood before them, and the change was immediately visible to anyone who'd known her before. She wore robes that showed her scars rather than concealing them behind layers of imperial dignity. Her posture was less rigid, more human despite her alien physiology. The aura still filled the space around her, still radiated power that made lesser beings feel small, but it was diminished from what it had been, softer at the edges. And most shocking of all, the delegates stood. They didn't kneel, didn't prostrate themselves, didn't offer the automatic submission that had defined every interaction with Valyrian royalty for 10,000 years. They stood in respectful silence, meeting her gaze, and waited for her to speak. "The Whisper Collective is not destroyed," Seraphine began, her voice carrying clearly across the chamber without need for amplification. "We eliminated one node, one concentration of their consciousness. We saved ourselves and denied them this sector. But they are patient beyond mortal comprehension. They are vast beyond mapping. They have existed since before our stars ignited. They will return." Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly, but no one panicked. They'd faced the horror firsthand and survived. Fear had become something they could acknowledge without being controlled by it. "However," Seraphine continued, her voice strengthening, "we have learned something they cannot comprehend. The collective has consumed civilizations for billions of years, wearing consciousness like clothing, dominating minds through pure psychic force. They've never faced beings who choose to resist despite biological imperatives to submit. They've never encountered the will to stand when every neuron screams to kneel." She gestured, and Declan walked forward to join her on the platform. He wore no formal attire, no ceremonial armor, no symbols of rank or authority, just his tactical gear, his weapons, his scars. His augmented eye gleamed in the chamber's lighting. His posture was relaxed but ready, a warrior who'd forgotten how to apologize for what he was. "Humanity," Seraphine said, her hand moving to rest on Declan's shoulder in a gesture of partnership that shocked the Valyrian delegates, "produces individuals who are neurologically immune to psychic domination. Not all of them, perhaps not even most, but enough. More importantly, humanity produces individuals who would rather die than submit regardless of what their biology demands. This man, Lieutenant Declan Thorne, showed me something I'd forgotten in 2 centuries of absolute rule." She looked at him, and the bond between them was visible to anyone with psychic sensitivity, a connection that transcended normal relationship parameters. "He showed me that submission is not strength, that true power comes from beings who choose to stand together, not because they must, but because they will. That dominion through fear is hollow compared to partnership built on respect. That an empress who inspires genuine loyalty is stronger than one who commands automatic worship." Seraphine turned back to the assembly. "I ruled for 200 years through the aura that made resistance impossible. Every being who looked at me felt compelled to kneel, to worship, to submit. I told myself this was natural, that superior power deserved automatic deference. I was wrong. What I commanded was obedience without choice, submission without meaning. I was a tyrant who'd never questioned whether my power was just, only whether it was effective." She paused, letting the words settle. "The humans showed me a different path, the path of those who stand by choice rather than compulsion. And when the collective came, when my power proved insufficient against enemies immune to domination, it was human tactics that saved us. Human stubbornness, human refusal to accept defeat as inevitable." Declan spoke then, his voice rough and human among the harmonics of alien languages, carrying the weight of someone who'd earned the right to address empires. "The Empress asked my opinion on the new galactic order. Here it is, unfiltered and blunt, the way humans talk. Stop kneeling to power just because it's powerful. Stop worshiping strength just because it can force submission. Build alliances based on choice, on mutual respect, on shared values rather than shared fear. He met the eyes of delegates across the chamber. Because when the collective returns, and they will return, you're going to need allies who know how to fight, not subjects who know how to bow. You're going to need beings who can think tactically when psychic domination fails. You're going to need warriors who refuse to quit even when biology screams surrender. His hand moved to rest over his heart, where the wound had been. The Empress died to save you, sacrificed her power to heal me, destroyed her own station to eliminate the collective threat. She chose your lives over her authority, your survival over her dominion. That's not the action of a tyrant. That's the choice of a leader who understands that power without responsibility is just another form of parasitism. The silence that followed was profound and heavy with implications. Then Ambassador Aldrich Montrose stood, his movements still uncertain from the trauma of possession, but his voice steady with conviction. The Outer Rim coalitions formally request that humanity be granted full membership in the Unified Assembly, with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereof. We further propose that Lieutenant Declan Thorne be recognized as humanity's formal representative, with full diplomatic status. The Krillex ambassador rose next, his crystalline features reflecting light in patterns that indicated deep thought. The Krillex sovereignty seconds this motion. We have seen human tactical thinking save lives when our own strategies failed. We have witnessed human courage in the face of odds that should have broken morale. They have earned their place among us. One by one, the other delegates added their support. Even species that had viewed humanity as primitive barbarians, as barely civilized children playing with technologies they didn't fully understand, now saw something valuable. Warriors who couldn't be broken, minds that couldn't be controlled, a species that had learned to thrive in a universe that actively tried to kill them. Seraphine accepted the motion with regal grace, but Declan saw the small smile on her lips, the one she saved for moments when something actually mattered beyond politics and power games. The summit concluded with formal treaties establishing humanity's place in galactic politics, trade agreements that would transform Earth's economy, and military protocols for coordinated defense against the collective's inevitable return. But the real change happened in smaller moments, in conversations between delegates who'd survived together, in bonds formed through shared trauma. Final evening, observation deck. Later that evening, when the formal proceedings had ended and the delegates had retreated to private quarters, Seraphine and Declan stood on the observation deck of her royal cruiser, watching stars wheel past in their eternal dance. The Empire will resist these changes, Seraphine said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd ruled long enough to understand political reality. My own people will see your influence on me as weakness, as proof that I've been compromised by alien corruption. Some will call for my abdication. Others will attempt coups, claiming they're saving the Empire from my diminished state. Will they succeed? No. Her smile was fierce. They'll try, because that's the nature of power politics. And they'll fail because they underestimate what I've become. I may have sacrificed much of my raw psychic strength, but what remains is tempered by experience they can't comprehend. I know how to fight without overwhelming power now. I understand tactics, adaptation, resilience. You taught me that. She took his hand, interlacing their fingers, feeling his pulse through their permanent connection. They'll realize eventually that what we have, this bond, this partnership, makes me stronger in ways pure dominance never could. That I've rediscovered something they all forgot when we chose psychic supremacy over physical connection. That an empress who can feel is more dangerous than one who merely commands. And if they don't realize it, then I'll demonstrate it. Her amber eyes gleamed with determination that was both alien and entirely recognizable. I didn't survive the collective, sacrifice my power, and bond my life to yours just to return to being the tyrant I was before. That version of me was powerful but hollow. This version, the one who can feel pain and joy and love and fear, this is who I was meant to become. Declan pulled her closer and they kissed with the stars as witness to something that transcended species boundaries. When they finally parted, he said what had been building in his mind since the medical bay. So what now? You're an empress with an empire that questions your fitness to rule. I'm a mercenary with diplomatic credentials I never asked for. We're bound together for life whether we planned it or not. Not exactly a traditional partnership by anyone's standards. Good. Seraphine's smile was genuine, warm, entirely unguarded in a way that would have shocked anyone who'd known her before. I've had 2 centuries of tradition, 200 years of doing what was expected, what was proper, what maintained the imperial image. Tradition gave me power, but took everything that made that power worth having. I think it's time for something new. I don't kneel, Declan reminded her, though they both knew it wasn't really a warning anymore. I know. Her eyes held his with affection that the bond made impossible to hide. That's why you're perfect. An empress needs someone who will stand beside her, not behind her. Someone who will tell her when she's wrong and support her when she's right. Someone who sees her as a person, not a position. You give me that. The bond gives me that. And I wouldn't trade it for all the power I sacrificed. They stood together on the observation deck, 2 beings from different worlds who'd found something neither had been looking for. Connection, trust, partnership built on respect rather than compulsion, and the fierce joy of facing an impossible universe side by side. In the distance, the galaxy turned in its ancient rhythms. The collective lurked somewhere in the dark between stars, patient and vast and plotting their return with the patience of entities that measured time in eons. The Valyrian Empire watched from its core worlds, uncertain about their empress's transformation, debating whether strength could exist without dominance. 100 species navigated new political realities, adjusting to a galactic order where humanity had proven its worth through stubborn refusal to accept defeat. But on that ship, in that moment, Declan Thorne and Empress Seraphine Vale were simply 2 beings who'd chosen to stand together, who'd faced death and chosen life, who'd sacrificed power for connection and found that the trade was worth everything it cost. The collective would return. The empire would resist change. Enemies would arise who saw their bond as weakness to exploit. The universe would continue trying to kill them in new and creative ways, because that's what the universe did to those who refused to submit to its entropy. And they would face it all together, neither kneeling nor dominating, but standing as partners who'd learned that true strength came not from the power to force submission, but from the courage to choose connection even when isolation was safer. That, more than any psychic power or tactical genius or imperial authority, was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.